Hello, everyone, and welcome to Business Share. I'm Patricia Raskin. Our guest today is Jeffrey Deckman. He's the founder of Capability Accelerators. He's also an award-winning entrepreneur, and he has a broad background in building organizations in the profit, nonprofit sectors, as well as the political sectors. Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks, Patricia.
Yeah, good to have you here.
Good to see you again.
All right, tell us a little bit about your business, which is Capability Accelerators. Really interesting name.
Well, it took me longer to come up with the name for my business than it did for me to come up with a name for my children. I thought about it.
I can understand that.
It's really confusing, and you know.
The names are more readily available for children.
Well, they are. You know, you have books on them, right? And you get to see which one's most popular this year, so those are the ones you avoid, right? Right. But I really struggled because I wanted something that would concisely define what it is that I was committed to doing. And at the end of several months, actually, I came up with the fact that what I'm really committed to is helping people to accelerate their access to the capabilities that they have in their organization that they can use to make themselves more profitable quicker. So Capability Accelerators really speaks to exactly what it is that I do.
So give us an example of how you would help a client do that.
Well, one of the first things that I do is I focus very heavily on the human capital aspect of the business. Traditionally, people focus on the financial capital.
Human talent, skills, assets.
Right, right. The mind power, the manpower, how is your organization designed, how are you using that very valuable asset, the human capital, the people in our organization. Their minds and their labor are the most essential asset of the organization. But traditional business models focus on financial capital. So what happens is we chase the dollar and we work our people in service of the dollar. And as a result, any statistic will, many statistics show that 70% of the people go to work are not happy there.
Right.
So,
and they won't be as productive.
And they won't be as productive. So what I do is I focus on helping organizations understand that as they maximize their human capital capabilities, the money follows it.
Right. Do you do anything with testing? Do you test your people to see what their compatibility is?
I really don't. I've spent a lot of time in that environment, and what I will survey people on is are on subjects that will allow me to see how they get along. You know, there are a lot of surveys out there, personality surveys, and while they're interesting, they're really not. They really don't give you information that allows you to use it to be able to increase
in that particular
performance.
Situation.
Right, because what happens is for me to do a DISC assessment, I mean, it's all interesting to see why maybe people don't get along, but if you're not a psychiatrist, if you're not a psychologist, you don't know what to do with that information.
Right. Or the Myers-Briggs is another one.
Myers-Briggs.
But that gives you just kind of a broad base,
Right.
whether you're an introvert or extrovert.
Right, and I was a partner in a think tank for about 3 years, and one of the things that we looked at quite a bit was those types of tests. So what I do is I really don't care about your personality that much. I mean, maybe it's interesting, but as a leader, as a manager, knowing your personality isn't really going to help me lead you in a proper direction.
So what is going to help you?
What's going to help you is creating an environment where you are intrinsically motivated to work with the person next to you and for the person whom has hired you.
So how do you figure that out, Jeff? Do you ask people what motivates them, or do you watch them?
The first thing I do is I ask them what is working and what is not working. People know what is holding them back.
And what do you hear, for example? Give us an example of what are things that hold people back.
One of the biggest things is I'm not being listened to by my supervisor. The biggest impact of the biggest determining factor of employee engagement is the relationship the individual has with their boss and what they think about their boss's boss.
So feeling valued, feeling self-worth, feeling appreciated,
Right.
accepted.
And it's more than just as a leader, I want to make sure you feel that. This is not about kumbaya. I tell all of my clients, this is not about kumbaya, this is about capitalism, okay? So for me to go around and make you feel good, that's okay. But the reason that I want to engage you is because when I walk into an organization, I'm walking into a living library. Those people in that organization know more about that organization than I, as president or CEO of it, will ever know. So I want to ask them, I want to engage them, I want to create a sense of safety that you can come and tell me problems you're seeing, that you can feel free to deliver an idea to me that you're not even sure what you think about, and I will encourage that. Because then I open up access to that human capital and that collective genius that's just sitting there waiting to be used.
And I think many times what happens is your idea isn't listened to because there's already a shut door.
Right.
You come in with something that you know would work, but you need that support, and you're not going to get it.
You're not going to get it. And as a result,
You shut down.
People shut down, and why wouldn't you? I have a perfect example. I've been coaching a young professional who's working his way up. He's a find. He's one of those people you want to hire, right? He's not working in the best organization. And he has had idea after idea after idea. And he gets a head nod. That's nice. We should do that.
Yes.
Most recently, he was asked by the CEO because he had some real ideas on how to develop his department. So the CEO says, well, write me a report. He writes a report, takes him a day and a half, sends it into the CEO within 20 minutes, literally. He gets an email back from the CEO saying, Sam, we'll use that name, Sam, nice work. It's good to see that you came to the same conclusion that I did myself 100 days ago. That was it. Do you think that person is ever going to give that CEO another idea? Because the report that he wrote, he knew there was no way it could be read in 20 minutes. And what the CEO did was to say, it's all about me, I'm smarter than you.
Right. I thought about it before you did, and it's not going to work.
Yeah. And, well, he didn't even say it's not going to work.
But he really did, though, in a way, non-verbally.
The next thing he said was, give me a very detailed, tactical report on how you would implement all this on my desk by tomorrow.
Right, so that I, as CEO, can then say it's my idea.
Or whatever. It was just a really disrespectful thing.
And what happened? Did he write that
No.
tactical report?
No, he didn't.
And the reason he didn't is because?
Is because he knew he was ignored, disrespected, and he just said, I'm not going to do that.
All
He
right,
didn't read the
let's
report.
rewind this situation. What would have worked? What would that CEO have done and said where this man then would have been engaged? Give an example.
Before I answer that, I want to set the premise that as a leader, you, in my opinion, I'm very passionate about this, obviously, it's what I do for a living. You have an obligation to be a nurturer. You have an obligation to function as a tribal elder, not as a ruler of a kingdom.
Right.
You can function as a ruler of a kingdom if you want. You know what? You're going to get a lot of folks that aren't working hard for you. You function as an elder, somebody who nurtures people. These people are going to come to you and they will follow you, which is what a true leader is. True leader isn't somebody who's in authority. True leader is somebody who has a consciousness where people want to follow them. In my opinion, what I would have done with that is I would have looked at that, I would have studied it, I would have brought the individual in, I would have thanked him first of all, and then I would have looked and said, this is what really looks like works. And anything that I didn't think would work, I wouldn't say I don't think it'll work. I would say, help me understand what your thinking behind that is. Every word I would have said to that individual would have been nurturing or teaching. It would have been coaching. It would have been building. Because I'm increasing my collective genius within my organization as I help develop.
But what if, Jeff, in all of that, you did believe that it probably wasn't going to happen? How would you handle that with this individual and still encourage him?
I would have been as honest with him as he was with me when he wrote that report. And I would have explained to him why it wouldn't work. I would have helped him understand what might have worked. But the main thing is, I would respect him. You know, when I talk to people about leadership, and I do a lot of that stuff, I give them a lot of tools, and I say, look, you're not going to remember all this, but if you can lead, and just remember this acronym, you can't go wrong. And I call it leading with care. And care is an acronym: compassion, authenticity, integrity, respect. If you lead following those 4 pillars, you can't go wrong. Because as long as you feel valued and respected by me, I didn't do anything wrong. And even if I mess up, well, the integrity part calls for me to come back and apologize, and I own that. And then we move forward.
You know, what you're talking about is really solid communication skills. Why is that so difficult? Is it that we're scared? Is it that we don't want to open to people? Why is this such a barrier? And it's universal, not just in professional relationships, but in personal relationships as well.
Well, you know, you're getting to the age-old question. The short answer of that is ego. And ego is fear-driven, right? Who we are as our highest self is love-driven. There's 2 primary emotions that humans walk around with, right? Love and fear.
So the thinking is, if I tell you too much or give too much of myself or nurture you too much, you may take advantage of me, or you may steal my idea.
Right.
Well, you may think I'm weak.
Well, and also it's like the joke of the HR person going to the CEO wanting to increase the professional development budget. And the CEO says, what if I train all these people and they learn all this stuff and then they leave? And the HR person said, what if we don't train them and they stay? Right? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
If you really believe that you're building a company, and you really believe that you're a powerful leader that can overcome adversity, and if you really love the people you're working with, you can't help but to develop them. I can't tell you how many people have come into my organization throughout the years and have learned and have developed and have had the opportunity to go somewhere else to get a job and a career path that would take them further than what my organization could. And I've welcomed that, and I've thanked them for their service, and I've congratulated them on their way, and we're still friends. Because even my ego gets fed by seeing someone who's worked their way up to a C-level environment that cut their teeth in my organization, and some of the things that I taught them helped them. Because it's got to be about them.
So Jeff, how did you develop this? You obviously worked in companies, worked in organizations. Talk about your background and how you developed to then creating your own company.
Well, it's a bit of a long story, but the fast version of it is I moved around a lot when I was a kid. My father was in the cable television industry, so I went to 3 different high schools in 4 years and a bunch of middle schools and grade schools, so I never really had any academic traction. So when I got out of high school, the last thing I was going to do was go to college, but I wanted to be a lineman. I wanted to be a tower worker. I was raised around those people because that's what my father did, was he built cable TV systems. So to me, that was a Wild West. That was like, you know, becoming a cowboy, right? So that's what I did. I got out of high school. I became a lineman when I was 17. I learned what it was like to be on the bottom of the bottom. And in fact, my first job title was actually being called a grunt.
Frontline. You were in the front lines.
No, a grunt, G-R-U-N-T. Because what happened was the lineman, I didn't even know how to climb, but you were just like the slave to the lineman. And they worked you so hard, they just called you a grunt. So I felt what it was like to be disrespected. Worked my way up, got into a cable television system, started to learn actual engineering skills. I became an engineer. And then after about 7 years, I started my first business. That went well for 5 years, and then it crashed. So I've had the experience of having a company go under, which really allows me to help and consult business owners from a whole different degrees. Because when you've crashed a plane, you learn how to fly a plane better, and you also learn how to survive a plane crash. And that's really important to be able to help somebody who thinks their business may be going maybe going down. And then I started another business after that crashed, and that one's still going. I sold it a week before its 21st birthday. It's in the technology space. And the reason I left that was because my real passion wasn't in building telecommunication companies. It was helping other people who went through what I went through to get through that easier. So I left that company and I started Capability Accelerators, and I focus on helping entrepreneurs learn not only the skills, but the mental mindsets that you really need to be able to persevere as an entrepreneur. When, a lot of times with an entrepreneur, you're scared. And it's okay you should be scared, right? But you can do one of two things with that fear. You can either have it freak you out, or you can have it focus you.
I often say I'm the uncomfortable entrepreneur.
Oh.
Because I'm doing what I love, and I'm being an entrepreneur because that's how I have to do it at this point.
And that discomfort creates creative tension.
Yes.
If I didn't have that discomfort, I wouldn't be motivated to be creative. And I think that I'm a very spiritual person. And I believe that entrepreneurialism is one of the greatest spiritual adventures you can go on, because it challenges you to have faith in yourself.
Because there's no guarantee.
None.
There's no guarantees anyway,
Right.
But it feels a little more guaranteed when you're having the paycheck and the benefits and all of that.
Well,
still.
my brothers have all worked for people, and they've done well, and they've brought that to me. You have no security. And I told them, I said, I have more security than you, because nobody's going to come into me on a Friday and say, I'm
You're
done.
gone.
And even when my business crashed, that was a year where I was trying to pull it up. And when I knew it was going to hit the mountain, I knew when it was going to hit the mountain. I knew the date. So I could at least prepare a little bit. But nobody has ever been able to control my income or my ability to protect my family. That's been on me. And I feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
And any of us can do it. You just have to have a passion. Find that passion, and then mobilize around that, and then find some people who can help coach you based on who you are, not from some personality test says who you are. Personality is such a small percentage of who we really are. It just speaks to what we do, not who we are.
Yeah. It's really also about aligning your vision with the people you're working with.
You have to have that.
You have to have that same vision.
Because everybody's got to be rowing in the same direction. And if I don't have alignment, I don't have agreement. If I don't have agreement, I have chaos. So that's one of the first things that I do within organizations, is get people aligned. And what I get them aligned on is, one of the first things I do is I help them realize that when you come to work in an organization here, you are entering a tribe. And that tribe is under attack. There's a lot of other tribes that want you gone, all of your competitors. It's nothing personal, but they don't want you to have the business. They don't want you to have good employees. They don't want you to have success. So when people start to look at themselves as members of a tribe who are under attack from other tribes, that starts to motivate them to get through some of those petty, you and I arguing this way. Well, while you and I are arguing this way, that makes us weaker for the competitor to come in.
Exactly.
And the other thing is, how much are we willing to charge our customer for our arguing? Because our arguing costs time, costs money, therefore prices have to go up or the company goes down.
Right. So it's very much about, again, that alignment and getting out of that pettiness to look at what's the bigger vision.
Right.
Now, if you're both aligned with the same vision, you can do it. If you're not, that's where you get stuck in the pettiness.
Right.
Because you don't really want what I really want.
So, and at that point, that's where the communication comes in. That's where you have to not look at that as a conflict, but look at that as a conversation. Has it worked its way out?
Yeah.
So why do you think the way you think? This is why I think, because there might be an adjustment that we could make in between that these two equal a better one. Or if not, we can agree to disagree, and then we can talk about how do we part ways.
Absolutely. And still be able to respect each other.
Right.
And help each other. Yeah. That's such a key. What are some tips that you can give to our viewers that would help them immediately in their business? Just some simple.
Yeah. First thing I would say is, stop looking at your organization as an org chart. It's not. It's not.
It's a viable, living, breathing,
There's
right?
a
Like
reason,
an amoeba that moves around.
Well, I tell my clients, there's a reason they call it an organization, because it's an organism. It's an organism that you are trying to organize, okay? So it's a tribe. And org charts have hierarchies, and hierarchies are vertical relationships. Vertical relationships are power-based relationships. If I go to somebody on the front line and I say, what do you think of the CEO? It's like, oh boy, I wouldn't do that, because it's almost like they're not even the same type of human. When you flatten the organization out from a relationship standpoint, people have to have job responsibilities, and you have to have people who run departments, don't get me wrong. But the way we relate to one another has to be flattened out, because that's the tribal model. And the tribal model has been successful for over 50,000 years. It's far more superior than the org chart. And what's happening is, now that we're leaving the industrial age and everything's linear, and we're in this knowledge and information age where everything is networked, we're starting, leaders, the people that are writing and talking about this stuff, like myself and many others, they're starting to revert people back to the tribal model. It's a matrix. You have to have it, because that's how we relate to one another. As a leader, I have to be on the outside of the circle. Simon Sinek, greatest book ever on leadership that I've read, is Leaders Eat Last, just came out. He talks about the circle of safety. And he says the circle of safety is, you have the tribe, and you have all these dangerous things that want the tribe dead. Again, nothing personal, but they're just... So what happens is, real leaders put themselves on the outlier of that circle of safety to make sure that everybody else is protected. If you look at Wall Street CEOs, they put themselves in the inside, and they sacrifice everybody outside. As a manager of a department, as a supervisor of a team, as a CEO of an organization, your obligation is to put yourself on that outside perimeter to make sure that everybody on the inside who comes in and works with you or for you is protected. Hold them responsible, accountable, etc. But you have to do that. If not, you should not be in a leadership position.
Yeah, I have a quick story. I grew up with my very best friend from childhood, and she's in West Hartford, Connecticut. She just retired as the principal of an elementary school. And 4 years ago, she was voted Principal of the Year for the state of Connecticut. So I went to this retirement party, and it was the most amazing thing to watch, Jeff, to watch the superintendent, the assistant superintendent, people get up and talk about this woman and how she treated people like they were her family. These were not her students, these were not her teachers, these were her family. And they had such love for her. They called her an incredible leader, but never talking about her as the principal. It was more, she was our friend. She was there for us. We cried together, we laughed together. It was just an amazing thing to watch, to see that incredible teamwork, to see what people said about her.
And she didn't have to show up and demand that she got respect. No. She functioned how she functioned, and people, as a result, because we are wired to protect leaders who protect us. It's in our DNA.
Yeah. And the other thing she did, which really exemplifies this, is when she got up to give her talk at the end, after everyone had given her accolades, she talked about all of her family members. Right. She mentioned me as her childhood friend. Right. She mentioned the principals, the teachers, the janitorial staff, the children, each one, and what they did to help and support her. It was refreshing to see.
Yeah. And you sitting there, you're still talking about that now.
I am.
That is the impact of true leaders. That is the impact. When I go into organizations, I oftentimes see nice people who are managers, who are in leadership positions. And that's one of the first things I have to tell people is, just because you're in a position of authority doesn't mean you're a leader. And I actually, one of the few assessments I do is to go through and survey everybody in an organization to identify, there's all these informal networks that are operating under the org chart that nobody sees, but that's where all the real work gets done. So I go in and I identify those, who are the hubs in the wheel, et cetera. And one of the things I'm looking for are elders. The elders who are not on the org chart, but people trust them, they believe them, and they follow them. So at first that can make the people in authority a little bit nervous until they understand that those elders are management assets that if you engage them in your conversation, if you want to implement something, it might be controversial, you ask the elder, what do you think? How do you think I should deliver it, et cetera? They're going to help you do that communication in a way that the tribe will understand. And then when you leave, everybody's going to go to the elder anyway and go, was he full of it or was he telling us the truth? And the elder is going to tell them that you're doing the right thing for the right reason. The elder will get the people to follow you. And these folks are hidden. And a lot of times, they don't want anything to do with power. They don't want anything to do with management. One of the coolest elders I ever worked with was a guy who managed the loading dock. And he, because of how, long story, but how I was able to integrate him into some key conversations with corporate, I should say C-level, the senior VP of operations, about once a week, would go out, stand on a loading dock,
And talk to him.
And say, how am I doing?
Because the guy in the loading dock sees everything.
Sees everything.
All of it.
All of it. In fact, he came up with a solution to a problem that they were having where their customer repairs were, or their customer returns were going out of control and nobody could figure it out. So I put interesting people in meetings. And after a while, he said, I'll tell you right where the problem is. And he said a certain part in the assembly line. And sure enough, long story short, everybody gets together and look and I go, that's it. And I looked at him and I said, how did you know that? He said, a year ago, Fred was sick for 3 weeks. They asked me to run that part of the assembly line. I ran it. I saw that. I told them. They didn't care. If they don't care to listen, I don't care to speak. And from that point on, that was when that vice president will go out on a loading dock once a week and say, how am I doing?
Jeff, I often ask this question. If the CEO were sick for a week, would the company run? And the answer is?
Of course.
Yes. If the people who run the building, the janitorial staff, the custodial staff, the people who turn on the lights and all of the power, if they were gone for a week, would the company run?
Nope.
Okay, that's what you're talking about.
Right.
That's exactly what you're talking about.
But to get back to what we talked a little bit earlier, why doesn't that happen more often? Egos. If I care less about personalities in organizations. Frankly, I don't care, because what I care about is the consciousness of the organization. Is it ego-driven, or is it driven from a higher level of consciousness?
Right.
And if it is ego-driven, it's not a bad thing, but we could probably move it up. You might lose some people along the way, but you can transform that organization, because leadership is a state of consciousness, and the first step on the path to leadership is an inward one, because nobody's going to follow me, nor should they, if I can't lead myself and I can't manage myself. If I'm ego-driven, that's the culture I'm creating through the tribe.
We have to close soon, but what I love about your story about the worker on the loading dock, or whatever his position is how integral he was. And we need to be looking at those people, like the linemen that you talked about,
Right.
the guys that climb the pole, because they see it.
They see it.
And we need to be
And they're
looking
right
at
on the
that
front
more.
line. And they can
Yeah.
tell you stuff that
Yeah.
you need to know,
Yeah.
but you have to respect them.
How would you like to close this? What would you like to leave our viewers with today? What's the word of wisdom, if they get nothing else out of this interview?
Everyone is a human. Everyone has value. I will guarantee that everyone that you meet knows something you don't. Talk to them. They will build your business for you.
That's wonderful, Jeff. Very inspirational and enlightening.
Well, I always love talking with you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff Deckman is the founder of Capability Accelerators. He's an award-winning entrepreneur, and he has a broad-based background in building organizations in the for-profit, nonprofit, and political sectors. And people can find you at?
www.capabilityaccelerators.com. I also have a blog that is jeffreydeckman.blogspot.com, and you can Google me. I Google well.
Okay. Thanks so much for being on the program.
Thanks.
All right.